Plenitude. We are starting this session, as Kirsten said, very exciting, and it's a continuation of the effort that we put last year when we studied the book Thought and Life to work on one book in one area throughout the year, so we can kind of learn with the author and learn about what the author would like to bring to us. Taking back of what we went through last year, we can say it's always a challenge, right? When we start, much like a contract with the author as well with one another, because when we say that we're going to go ahead and work throughout the year, many sessions, not only we are invited to study, but also to put into practice. And you may ask, how can we help, right? Or how can we be more part of these sessions? Buy the book and read the book. I'm going to say it again. Buy the book and read the book. Please participate. Please ask questions. Send me questions, because if I don't know, guess what? I'll tell you. We'll find out together. And it makes more appealing to all of us when we participate. What I would like to say in this first session is that I cannot offer or I cannot promise you that you will feel plentiful, and we're gonna get to the word plenitude. And I cannot tell you, well, for sure, I can tell you that this is not about being happy, right? And I'll tell you the reason why. So hang in there, because tonight we're going to cover just the beginning of the book. It's not a chapter, it's just the introduction that Joanna de Angelis brings to us, and then chapter 1. And then we'll see how we're going to break it down into number of chapters that we'll be studying throughout the year. We'll try to take it slow, instead of doing 3 chapters as we were doing with Thought and Life. We'll only do a couple chapters at the beginning of the year, and then for the second part of the year, we'll be just covering 1 chapter. It makes it lighter, easier for us to understand, and easier for us to exercise it. Happy also that towards the end of the year, last year, I was already thinking about on what to work on, right, or what book to work on. And this book has been with me for quite some time now. I have the Portuguese version, and Kirsten, happily enough, brought a copy to me of the English version from Florida in one of her visits to Florida. Thank you, Kirsten. And we're happy that Kirsten also, as we were thinking about and deciding about work on this book, she also was thinking about to work on another book of Joanna de Angelis, that is entitled Jesus in Our Days. That is part of the collection, the psychological collection that Joanna de Angelis put together, which is about, I think, 17 books. She has over 60 books psychographed by the medium Divaldo Franco. And it's very intriguing because it really tests us. Joanna de Angelis really wants us to get to this point of plenitude, of happiness. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge because we live on planet Earth. It's a challenge because we have feelings, because we emanate thoughts, as we learned last year with Emmanuel. And we receive the emanation of thoughts and feelings of others as well. And we process. Thank God. Because we're not just robots. We're not just elements, non-living elements, right, on Earth. And that's what we have to get to. The book Plenitude was psychographed, if I'm not mistaken, back in 91, the first version in Portuguese. So it's fairly recent compared to some of the books. For example, some of the André Luiz books, in the 50s, 60s, you name it. So it's fairly new compared to what we have seen. It has a lot of interesting information, cross-referencing information from other religions, from other thoughts, holistic thoughts and all. So it really, it inspires us to go back and truly study what we have been seeing, especially here in the US, which is an amazing field of holistic ideals and ideas that we learn with different religions as well. And the transformations of the conventional religions that we see nowadays, right? So it's an invitation for us to study. And that's why I said, please help and study with me, because it's definitely a way for us to be happy. Plenitude, in a kind of way and funny as well. When we look at the book, the title of the book, you think that we're going to be talking about what? Good. That's the where we want to be. That's where we're going to get to. But before we get to plenitude, the fullness that you mentioned, right? We have to overcome what? Difficulties, personal barriers, challenges, suffering. Planet Earth, we're still in the transition from a planet of trials and expiation to a planet of regeneration, as we learned with Spiritism. It's not happiness yet. It's not happiness yet. When we start working on the book, we look at it and say, okay, is this another way for us to look at suffering on the barriers of life, whatever it is, in another way that we feel happy and we're singing Kumbaya? No, it's not. Because at first it seems like, okay, is this something that we're reading again and it's just going to push us to be resilient, right? That idea that we are just bow our heads and everything is okay. No, it's quite the opposite. One of the angels is telling us, let's work. Let's exercise our will. Let's be persistent, right? So we will talk about suffering. Most of the book is about suffering. Take a look at this. These are all the chapters of the book. The first one, the introduction, plenitude. Chapter 1, suffering. An analysis of suffering, the origins of suffering, the end of suffering, the approaches to end suffering, altruism, causes of suffering, pathways to health, the process of self-healing, disobsession therapy, alternative therapies, suffering in the face of death, suffering in the afterlife, release from suffering. Before we get to it, we need to work. We need to dissipate all our ideas that we have, that the sufferings that we see in life, and we see these different type of sufferings, is for us to suffer as we understand. That there is somebody up there or somewhere in the universe demanding that we suffer, that we cry. And believe me, I put myself out there. When I came in contact with Spiritism, what we do, something that we will acknowledge a little bit further on today, is the idea that because of past lives, because of past wrongdoings, we now must suffer. It's a very difficult way to approach life. And we suffer even more, as we will see in further chapters. We suffer even more. There is a suffering over suffering that we need to work on. But that's chapter number 2. We're not going to talk about that today. We're already trying to jump, right? So we need to change. And yes, we think that perhaps because of the past, I now have to suffer. Wait a minute. I have responsibilities that I have to work with now, right, for my wrongdoings of the past. But not necessarily I must see this as a suffering, but a release, a chance to change from what I have been and what I have done. We need to change. So, the word plenitude, it's a noun. The definition is the quality of or state of being full, completeness, right? Much like when we're hungry and we eat something, not too much that we feel, oh my God, I'm going to die. We eat enough that we feel well. And we love the food that we ate. That we want so much to tell someone else, go and eat that food, go to that restaurant, right? I'm giving you something mundane because it's easy for us to associate, because it's even hard for us to understand what this completeness really is. In the physical body, in on planet Earth. It's really hard. If just the idea of reincarnating in the physical body, it's suffering. It's not easy for the mother, for the spirit who is reincarnating. It's a lovely thing. It's an amazing thing, as we have seen here on the SSB and other ways too. It's God, right, living, showing us that there's love everywhere, but it's not easy. There's a struggle. Much so that we see also information through the books that there are spirits when they're engaging in this process of reincarnating, they get pretty, let's say, worried, to say the least. And they have to go through a process of adaptation before they reincarnate. So plenitude is this idea of being full, being complete, the abundance, having sufficient in our lives, right? But we're not talking about the material only. We include the material, we acknowledge the material, and we'll see Joanna De Angelis being very specific about this, but we're trying to say that it's the abundance of life, the abundance of understanding that we are eternal. Not only we had a beginning, which was a long time ago, but also we are eternal. There's no end. And that, for us to understand and live in our lives every day, it's quite hard. It's quite hard. So we will cover these first two chapters, if we can say it that way, the introduction entitled Plenitude, and then chapter 1, Suffering. What we would like to propose is that throughout the year, next month we'll cover 2 other chapters, and in March 2 other chapters, and then from chapter 6 on, we will cover just 1 chapter. If there is any changes in what we will cover, we will mention and we will send before. Why? Because I would like to make you part of this. What we would like to do is that not only through the end of each talk that we'll have, I will send you home with some homework. It's just going to be a question or two that you need to take note of it and answer it so you can bring to the next session. All right? You perhaps won't have to share, but at least you bring with you so you remember. All right? It's going to be a little exercise. As well as for those of you who are part of our WhatsApp group, I will be sending you questions. No, it's important. It's really important because, as Kirsten was saying, if we take this book and we just flip it over and we read, but we don't really stop and think, you're wasting your time. I'm wasting my time. And then once we read and we dive into it, we have to exercise it. It's the contract. There's no paper. It's our conscience, our heart, with everyone else. Because once we leave these doors tonight, we have received 2 beautiful chapters from Joanna De Angelis. We won't just bring every single thing, but the highlights of it and what's important to our day-to-day lives. But we know more. And knowing more, we have a higher responsibility. Excuse me, I have a little cold, so just bear with me. Joanna De Angelis starts this way. Daniel, is the font kind of... Okay, all right. Excuse me for 1 second. I can make it. I can change it real quick. No worries. Take this guy out. But this guy, that's okay. This guy. All right. Oh no. All right, and we may have to do this for the. No, I made it. Huh? All right. I thought it was a beautiful background, but we'll work with what we have. You see? There's a suffering out because I wanted to show you the sky. But we overcome it. And the sun, right? But that's okay. We work with this majestic picture that is the cover of the book. Giovanna de Angelis starts by saying pessimistic philosophies and arbitrary religious doctrines have established that life means suffering, and therefore every attempt at release from suffering results in failure. Let me take a look at it if I really copy this correctly. Put my glasses on. I may have pessimist philosophies and arbitrary religious doctrines have established that life means suffering, and therefore every attempt at release from suffering results in failure. It is correct. So, faithful to this ignoble diagnosis, rash thinkers of yesterday and today have proposed suicide, euthanasia, and abortion as escape mechanism for dealing with distressing situations, and the death penalty as a means of punishment. All these approaches are the result of merciless and rebellious materialistic behaviors where cruelty assumes the leading role. Such individuals build their aspiration on utilitarianism and hedonism. But these are responsible for the distorted view of reality from which they wish to be free. Is it true that we are thinking the same way, or do you connect with this idea that all that we do in our lives is to run away from suffering, from difficulties? We may not have that idea, but if we truly dive within ourselves every day, as we hear, as we about to start the day, as we come in contact with other people, is to do what? Get by, right? Deal with work, deal with the family, deal with this, deal with that. But we have a very limited way to see life, to look at life, because everything is suffering. There's a struggle to get to work. There's a struggle to come back from work. There's a struggles at work, and I'm just starting the day, and as we start with day. For some of us, we have to take care of the kids, which is another struggle. And we look at life at the end of the day by having to cook dinner and sit down with family as a struggle as well, because we want to do something else. And life goes on. I know it seems miserable, but where's the beauty of the whole thing? And where is the necessity to go through this? And this is what Giovanna de Angelis is calling us to do. What is the reason of all of this? Because we, in a way, have been inserted in this body, and here we are now dealing with suffering, now dealing with an idea that I really don't want to be here, or if I'm here, I want to do different things, right? And then we find ourselves in this different mechanism of looking for a way out. Sometimes not directly, sometimes indirectly. Because we have these aspirations inside of us of being a utilitarian, being an hedonism. What is utilitarian? What is to be an utilitarian? Does anybody know? Does anybody know what to be a hedonistic individual? I know you do, Paula. I brought a video for each of you guys to see, for all of us to watch, because this is a little foundation that Giovanna de Angelis is bringing to us, because sometimes we don't feel that we see life this way, but we do. And this responds to a lot of the trouble, a lot of the sufferings that we have. Excuse me for 1 second. This first video is about utilitarianism, and the second one that I will show, it's about hedonism. I would like to go and, before I play the video, this first one is going to be about 7 minutes, to give thanks to PBS for this beautiful video. And then the second one is through the Khan Academy website. Both beautiful videos, well put. This one a little bit funny. So hang in there, because at first you think that has nothing to do with the idea that we're bringing here, but it will make sense towards the end. Thank you, Daniel. So just to go back, we're studying utilitarianism, a doctrine that the useful is the good, and that the determining consideration of right conduct should be the usefulness of its consequences, specifically a theory that the aim of action should be the largest possible balance of pleasure over pain, or the greatest happiness over the greatest number. So if we're able to produce happiness, the greatest number of happiness, even though that may sacrifice the happiness of others, if we're thinking about that the product is the greatest happiness, so be it. And I'll let you think about it. But do we see that happening in our society nowadays? Do we see that happening in our lives nowadays? Don't answer it. Let's find out what hedonism actually looks like. Kirsten, can you bring the light on again, please? So, two little videos there. And the reason we brought this, even though it's a little bit lengthy for us to watch the whole thing, is for us to truly, when we're reading the book, is to go and exercise our will and understand what these words that John DeAngelis bring into us as hedonism through the Merriam-Webster dictionary is the doctrine that pleasure or happiness is the sole or chief good in life, a way of life based on or suggesting the principles of hedonism. She was a perfect specimen of selfish hedonism, done on Armstrong. And we also would like to emphasize again on when we are dealing with these different types of questioning about life, we have to do what? We have to bring the opposite idea. We have to study the consequences of it. And that's what a lot of the philosophers do when they're analyzing such a theories or different theories. So just an illustration of what this book is bringing to us. And so we understand that a lot of our sufferings, as we will see throughout the book, it's grounded on this, that we're looking for pleasure. We're running from the reality and we're looking for pleasure. We're looking for ways out, right? Ways that we will live our life in the immediate. Things that brings to us pleasure based on what? Based on our materialistic view of life. So John DeAngelis says the following. Of course, suffering is part of life. It is nature's device through which intellectual and moral progress is expressed and consolidated. So analyzing the idea of, I'm trying to take this out, excuse me for one moment. Taking the idea that we are, just 1 second, guys. I'm just going to leave it the way it is, and I'll read it for you guys. Sorry. Of course, suffering is part of life. It's nature's device through which intellectual and moral progress is expressed and consolidated. It's a way for us to progress. But how do we take this idea of progress when we are in face of suffering? What's the only way out? We'll see further down the road. Likewise, the spirit needs to polish the edges that hide its light. And for that reason, suffering is a normal occurrence, which knowledge and willpower can direct in a balanced way so that suffering can fulfill its sublime purpose. I want to read these two parts and I'll give you a couple examples. Everything goes through suffering. Everything goes through challenges, right? For example, these chairs to be here, the metal that composes the chair, it's part of the chair. The plastic had to go through what? Fire, right? Had to go through some changes. Through the hammer of whatever, right? When we look at a diamond, for example, it had to go through the pressure of earth, right? Through certain thousands and thousands of years to become a diamond, right? But before becoming a diamond was what? Just dirt, if we can express that way, right? Ourselves, to get to the point where we are right now, we also suffered. We went through our primitive states, and we evolved, and here we are today, dealing with some of the things that perhaps we don't like that will help us ascend to a much higher position. So we need the suffering that we're analyzing here. And when we look at the little by little, we'll be able to change our perception of suffering. But it's not something that's going to happen just yet. On the other hand, suffering is linked to each person's sensitivity. Thus, it varies and takes on the different dimensions accordingly. Excuse me. The pain of the brute is wild and perturbing, exploding in aggression and madness, whereas the suffering of the esthete and the saint is expressed as a yearning for deliverance and inner growth. This right here is key for our ways to deal with our suffering and the suffering of others as well. I always like to use the example of a paper cut, right? The little annoying paper cut. It's not a major thing, but it hurts. It's annoying, right? When you have that paper cut so when you have your own paper cut and somebody says, it's just a paper cut. You're like, wait a minute, but it hurts. It hurts, right? Sometimes we like to do that with our brothers and sisters, to say that their pain is nothing, to say that their pain, even though perhaps we have already been through and we survived, we think that, we can just go back and say, oh, that's nothing. You'll be fine. That person is going through that moment of pain right now. If we went through it, we really have to help that individual. Just say, look, hang in there. I'll be here. Can I get you something? Can I help you somehow? Right? And also to help us analyze ourselves when we're dealing with our pain, that if there are higher minds, that they're looking through that suffering moment to grow, we can do the same thing. Just like the saints that she's mentioning over here. Just like the higher minds that we study, that we come in contact, they look at the problems of the earth. Think of our mentors, for example, the mentors of certain aspects of earth right now. What do you think they were thinking? Do you think they're in despair because we have a government shut down? No. They, number one, accept our free will, right? They understand that we have our choices that we can make individually and in collectively as well, but they don't despair. And they have an understanding as well, and we'll talk more about this over and over and over, that there is a God. But they see it as an opportunity. And as it goes through the first stage of life, thanks to the evolutionary automatism, the psyche expands in its innate aptitude and develops its dormant seeds of perfection, becoming heirs to its past experience. So this is the part that I would like to formally acknowledge the fact that we are millenary beings. The sufferings that we see right now, yes, as we mentioned earlier, can be a consequence of what we have done in the past. And it is. Everything that we have done so far, as we have mentioned here before, all the encounters that we have, both the living and the non-living, it's a consequence of what we have done in the past. Why you're here today? We made a decision. We made a decision based on what we have created in the past. The friendships, right? The ability to know that somehow there is this place because we went after. Over the years, we cultivated, and here we are together, right? So just a little glimpse to understand that we are just a consequence of our past. Now, take that and transform it to the future. It's something that we hear every single time we come to the SSB, but it's never a bad thing to remember again. Because tomorrow, it's a consequence of today. A year from now, 10 years from now, the next life, right? So what are we doing with the suffering, the challenges that we're having in our lives now? How do we see it? It's up to each one of us to answer it. So we come in contact with all these different ideas that we're seeing now, all the changes that we're seeing in our lives now, all the callings to truly analyze who we are. And Joanna de Angelis says that anticipating such a modern day behavior, Spiritism has been summoning human beings to respect God, themselves, each other, and all living and non-living expressions that comprise their environment in order to learn and be happy, thus acquiring plenitude. Why do we bring this part of the book? She says, living and non-living expressions of life. We have problems with one another, but we're also excited by the material things of life, our physical bodies, right? Contemplating the physical body, thinking that this physical body is going to be the perfect body for all our lives. No, it's going through the process of decaying that we have to analyze and see, look, it's time to have knee pain, to have back pain. And I'm saying this because I have those two friends already bugging me, right? It's normal. It's a normal process. Is it suffering? It's not easy. But it's a way for me to grow. Because when I have to stand up a little slower, right? Correct my posture, because I can't just be like this, right? And everybody's now fixing themselves on the chair, right? Right? Or walk straight. Don't walk slouchy, because your knee is going to complain later on. Just giving a couple examples for us to think that we have to analyze not only the living beings, because we have problems with one another, things that we have to fix, love more, be more lovable, right? Accept love as well, but also the other things excites us. Not to look just for the physical things and say, oh, I want this and I want it now. This will bring me more pleasure. This will bring my family more pleasure. But there is a cost to it that we have to acknowledge too. Considering the human's quandary individuals are faced with their lack of self-knowledge, and considering the pressing factors that trigger suffering, dragging multitude into folly, despair, insanity, and shameful escape by means of suicide and vice, we decided to delve into studies about suffering, and we offer them to the esteemed reader interested in solving this terrible scourge, responsible for countless ills for some and blessings for others, enabling the latter to ascend and to succeed. We analyze some of the aspects of suffering from the Buddhist and the Christian perspectives, and propose the spiritist solution due to the timelessness of the postulates that comprise the revelation of the Consoler, inviting humans to self-discovery, to live in the gospel, and to lucid behavior resulting from study and illuminative work on the path of fraternal charity. This is what Joanna de Angelis will be offering through this book. This beautiful analysis of the Buddhist, as she's mentioned here, the Christian, and bringing the Spiritism to enlighten us our responsibility with life, with one another, right? To say, where are we going with all of this? Where can we be? How can we be plentiful? In the next chapters, we'll see that she makes some references to Buddhist ideals that is very helpful for us, right? Not to live in the both extremes of life, but live with balance, right? But we'll see more of that in the future. And it's interesting that she brings this timelessness of that Spiritism brings to us, right? Of allowing us to truly see our essence. That is not just this lifetime. That is not just this moment, but many lives. The baggage that we bring from the past, what we have in our hands right now, what we are really gathering in our hands right now with the past, but also what we will take with us in the future, as well as what everybody else has with them. Not to judge, but to truly utilize our baggage in a nice way. So chapter 1. As we mentioned, it's not entitled Plenitude. It's suffering. More suffering. But we will change this idea and this perception of what suffering is. And then perhaps towards the end of the book, we may look at, we don't use suffering anymore. We're going to be using challenges. We may be using experiences that we have, right? Instead of giving this bad connotation that we give to the word suffering. Humans strive laboriously to overcome suffering, which they see as a vile enemy. Throughout history, they have waged an ongoing, fierce, but unsuccessful battle to evade pain, exhausting their strength, courage, and balance, only to fall into even worse afflictions afterwards. I put the little baby with the father there. We have Raphael here. Hopefully, he hasn't done this to his parents. But have you seen when the child is fighting tiredness? Have you seen when the child is actually crying because they were tired? It's us every single day of our lives, right? We are tired, or we are or upset with something, and we get ourselves into more trouble. Instead of slow down and say, you know what, I don't need that. I don't need to get into that. I don't need to get into a problem with this individual. I don't have to give a continuation to this argument. What do? We cry. We get upset. And we give, that person a lip. We give this person, we do this, we do that. It's the same thing. It's a reaction. It's a reactive mode that we create in our lives. The baby don't have control. They don't know. And all that they see is or feel is the ability to scream. They want attention. They don't know that if they put their heads down, they will sleep. Quite frankly, a lot of the issues happens when parents now acknowledging that part is that because I went after as well, because most of the time that happens because the parents miss the time that the baby had to go to sleep, had to fall asleep, take their little nap, and then they get more tired and they get upset. But it's a way for us to exemplify what we're trying to bring here in this first part of chapter 1. 2 bullet points that I bring here, and we'll discuss. It is our main goal to get through suffering unscathed. We desire instant gratification, and consequently, suffering has been seen as a divine punishment or revenge, and thus an object of abhorrence or upsetness and hatred. So, because of this idea that we have to get instant gratification, because we want it now, and we always try to get by without being unhurt, right? Or live through life, right? When you ask somebody, perhaps people throughout the day, how are you? They're like, yeah, living life. Well, how was that? Obviously, you don't want to ask because you're going to be open a can of worms. But it's one of the things that we see in our society, and we keep our heads down, and we feel lonely, and we feel upset, right? Number one, we don't express ourselves the way we should express, right? And we bottle everything. And then we find ourselves in the escape modes that we have seen, and we'll see more. Analyzing this whole thing, Jonah DeAngelo brings the two sides that are not yet in the balancing mode. In various mythologies, the figures of jealous, spiteful gods, inflicting punishment on people and taking pleasure in their pain have been the age-old answer to earthly sufferings. The different philosophical school and religious doctrine have somewhat in agreement with such an absurd notion have established purifying methods for release from suffering. These methods range from the most barbaric, scourges, silices, ritual killings, promises, and offerings to the severest asceticism, seeking to deny the world and hate it so that by assuming such postures, they might pacify or please gods or God. In one side, we're budgeting with God. If I do this, if I live this way, you get me out of suffering, or you'll help me get by. If I offer you this, guess what? Why don't you give me that, right? Or we live under fear, saying, if I do this, God will not punish me. How many times that happens to ourselves in our lives? That we're budging with life. Perhaps we don't even have this notion or conversation with God, but we have this idea that if I do A, B, or C, this will free me from situations in life that I don't have to go through. Sometimes that can be detrimental in a way that we do things that we're in fact directly analyzing life this way, or sometimes we don't do things in life because we're too afraid, because we think that we will be punished. It's okay to take risks in life. It's okay to do things in life that perhaps it may be a little bit risky. When I say risky, is that it will test our intellectual, moral capabilities. Going to school, taking on perhaps an idea to buy something for you or for your family, or to establish a family, right? But we think that we know there will be too much problems in my life. I will be punished. I'll have to deal with certain things that I don't want to deal with it. Well, there's a price for everything. Then the second part of it is that at the same time, Stoicism heirs to certain Eastern behavior has attempted to humanize people against suffering by encouraging them to lead lives of serious sacrifice, in itself a cause of suffering. Live by the book. Yes, live by the book. We have to do the right things in life, but it's not that I'm going to create certain things in my life that will help me punish myself. I don't have to look at the idea of past lives and bring that idea onto me to think that it's okay to suffer. It's okay to cry. It's okay to let my neighbor say A, B, or C to me because I'm just paying things from the past. That is not living righteously. It's really us not taking full responsibility of our day-to-day actions and what has happened in the past. So we have to bring this balance. We have to bring balance in our lives. And we'll see a little bit more balance in our lives in the future chapters. But it's, let us look at life in a more calm way, inviting way. Because if we acknowledge that there is a creator, if we're going to this path that we have to suffer or we have to live in the extremes, then we're not on the right path here. Joanna de Angelis, if anything that we can take tonight, Joanna de Angelis brings this to us. Pain, however, is not a punishment. Instead, it is one of life's excellent devices for achieving its own goals. Daniel, and forgive me, Daniel and Kirsten, I'll bring this example. Was bringing the example last week of Raphael having the shots that every baby, right, has to receive, and it's painful for the child and it's painful for the parents. My kids received, we all received, hopefully, and we know it's painful. Imagine for a little baby. But we know now with our reasoning, our technology, that if the baby doesn't have the vaccines, what happens? They're going to suffer even more. Now, that may be an utilitarian way to think that, that little suffering now will prevent more suffering in a flip way or mode to see. But it's true, right? That we need these moments of our lives to really ascend, to live better lives. And thank God for, the medicine, technology that we have that prevents us so much harm, and more is coming, hopefully. There are several discoveries that we can exemplify that perhaps through the suffering of many, the trials, the errors, now we're much better off. Here's a very also important message that Joanna de Angelis brings to us as to start with this idea of suffering. Since suffering has a variety of causes, every effort to mitigate it without removing them will work only as a palliative and postponement. Even when a form of treatment does reward patients with sudden release of the treatment did not reach the cause that triggered the suffering, he will go from one problem to the next without having acquired real health. Why do I put the trash guy next to it? We have to remove it. It may not be one day. It may not be two. It may be a season. It may be several years. It may be a lifetime. That we have to constantly remove the trash of our beings, inside of us in order for us to reach this fulfillment or fulfilling life, right? The plenitude. If we don't take the trash, if we don't take that little fruit, the bad fruit from the fruit tray, whatever we want to call, what's going to happen? The fly is going to stay there, and it's going to rot in the other ones as well, right? So we have to take the trash out. Just to cut part of it and leaving a little tiny bit that is still have some mold on that orange or the banana, guess what? It's just going to grow the next day. And it's the same thing in our lives. It may give us some time to get by, but if we don't remove the trash from our mental trash, the trash in our hearts, right? What's around us that doesn't serve us anymore. Remember, we're acknowledging the living and the non-living. So physical things as well that doesn't serve us a purpose anymore. We have to remove it. We have to remove it. This is because in every degenerative process of affliction, the spirit itself is always responsible, consciously or not. And of course, peace arises only once the spirit has chosen inner harmony. It's not Leo who is saying, guys, about responsibility. It's Joanna de Angelis. Whether we like it or not, whether we think that we're responsible or not, there is a responsibility for who we are today and how we are today. We are responsible for it. And it's not just Leo being responsible for myself, but collectively as well. I'm not putting responsibility on you guys for being who I am right now, but we help one another. Think about it, right? We could have chosen to be someplace else, but we choose to be here. If the meeting tonight is not a meeting of enlightenment, helping, discussion about something that is productive, I would be responsible with you guys. The same way that once we live here and the way we conduct ourselves wherever we may go, we will be responsible for those individuals as well. So there is a responsibility. Everything comes back to us. Everything comes back to us. In such a situation, even in the event of biological changes, the ensuing suffering does not affect the emotions or become harmful. Like other physiological automatism, the conscience simply does not register its manifestation. What Joanna de Angelis is trying to say here, and this is actually after a couple paragraphs down, what Joanna de Angelis is saying here, that there are certain situations in our lives that even though it happens to us, we don't register because we don't let ourselves deal with that situation thinking that that was a punishment. That's a way for me to ascend. It's the same thing that Emmanuel mentions in Thought and Life. The emanations of others, it's inedible. But the way I accept them, the way I allow them to touch my heart and move me around with the environment around me is up to me. So yes, I can see detrimental things. I can come in contact with mundane things. And I know that doesn't serve me, and I don't let that destroy me. The same thing that many of us, we have issues within our physical body, and you see that individual dealing so well with that problem, so resilient. They worry about something else. If they cannot take care of that problem now, they're taking care of other issues. Mothers, they have colds, right? Do they stop taking care of their kids? No. They get up in the morning, they do what they have to do. They're coughing, they're unhappy because of that illness, but they are still providing to their kids. Just another example. Another one that Joanna de Angelis brings to us, I should have made it bigger. Suffering, therefore, can and should be considered a disease of the soul which still clings to sensations favoring paths and actions that produce imbalance. Based on my way of seeing life, it becomes suffering. But if I see it as a challenge, if I see it as a way to grow, guess what? It's something temporary. It's something that will change with time. To finalize, what not to do? She tells us reactions of anger Violence and rebelliousness only increase suffering by triggering further disharmony in previously unaffected areas. Previously unaffected areas. So let's say I have an issue, right, that I'm facing it right now, and I rebel against that problem. Name it a problem, something. We can say something physical, a child disease. Thank you. How will that affect me if I rebel? Paula? There you have two problems. Thank you. Now, not only that child, is going through, fighting a disease, now you also have your immune system because your detrimental thoughts, right? Your disharmony. Now it's making you incapable not only to help that child, but to also help yourselves. So we have to analyze how we perceive these sufferings, how we perceive these challenges, right? What must we do then, right? And she says dynamic resignation. Here's Paula looking at me, resignation. She's like, no, Leo. Exactly. That is accepting the problem with courage to face and remove its cause is a major step towards solving it. All these years that we have been talking about resignation, now we come to the best explanation through Joanna de Angelis is the acceptance of the problem with courage. It's not just saying, okay, I accept. No, with courage. What can we do to fix it? What is the cause of the problem? Who can I go after to help me with this? Where can I find strength? All of these questions. If you feel that it's a little bit hot in here, then it's kind of warm, I think. And then she says, mental and moral balance in the face of suffering is of unsuspected positive value and can be achieved through the practice of meditations and prayer, which derive from the knowledge that illuminates and properly guides the conscience. Another point here, we talk about meditation. We talk about prayer as one of the things that we talk about it and mention and do it together over and over here at the SSB. But what we most of the time fail to realize is the fact that we think that it's going to happen tomorrow because we pray tonight, right? No. She talks about this practice of meditation. It's every single day. It's that negative. It's that positive thought that you will take the negative away, and you start visualizing the positive happening in your life. You may say, "Oh, Leo, but what am I faking myself or lying to myself?" No, it's really bringing that wellness, the fullness into your life, and it's a practice. Because at first we're so debilitated that we're going to say, "Oh my gosh, this is so hard." Ask somebody else to do it until you have the courage and the capability to do it. And I don't know about you, but I have been through situations that it's like I can't pray, and I love to pray. I can't say a word. And I love to talk in certain times, really. But we have all been through that situation, and it's okay. Suffering and love are evolution's independent driving forces. When one recedes, the other comes forth, sometimes crowning the final step of the struggle they normally cause. The story of the martyrs attests to the veracity of the concept. Above them all, however, the example of Jesus stands out. Through love, Jesus taught victory over suffering throughout his entire life, especially in the climatic moments from the, I always get these words, please help me, Kittenese, to Golgotha, and from there to resurrection. These are the final words that Joanna de Angelis brings to us. Gethsemane, thank you. Brings to us about suffering in this first chapter. It's not an easy road. And that's what, when we come in contact with the book, again, seeing plenitude, the fullness that we're looking for, And then we start flipping the pages and we were talking about suffering. It's not an easy road. But think of a higher mind that have been through many, many situations. And we get confirmation that she was one of these martyrs. For those of us who can read Portuguese, in the book, I forget now. No, not Ave Cristo. That's a good example. But that Joana de Angelis is the story of Joana de Cusa. What's the name of the book? I will remember. But she actually, her story is brought to us. Joana de Cusa actually not denying Jesus and actually put in a stake. And we have heard of the story here, and many others in our day-to-day lives that they're on the fire for us, right? Our parents, what they have done for us, or many life representatives they're doing for us, fighting for a cause, right? Having to fight, put up a fight, having to suffer for a greater cause, not in a mundane way, but truly analyzing, saying this is going to lead us somewhere, even if I have to sweat blood. There is a lot of them nowadays, and this is what we have to emphasize. The same way that we take our capabilities, what we have discovered within ourselves, and we put to good use as well. It's not going to be an easy road. I hope that you guys, once the book is here, can buy the book and read with me. We will be, again, inviting everyone to think about certain topics, about certain things, discuss certain things when we meet again. In the next session, we will try to cover these two other chapters, an analysis of suffering. Even though we talk about suffering today, you will see how she analyzed suffering, right? Because you think, oh, we know already about suffering, but you analyze, and she will also bring the origins of suffering as well. Some already we have mentioned glimpses of past lives, what we're doing nowadays, right? The collective, the individual part of it, but there is more to come. We hope that everyone start to understand ourselves. This was much bigger on my computer, but I don't know what happened. Let us understand ourselves and one another and reach plenitude. I'll open up for questions, comments that you may have. Even if you have glimpsed about the book, please let me know. Or what do you think about this idea of plenitude? Have you ever felt plentiful? Or what are the struggles that you have in your lives nowadays that you want to work with through this book? Anyone? Kirsten.
A great talk. I think it's fair to say. Okay, that Raphael wanted to talk. I think it's fair enough. I think it's fair enough for us to say. I think it's correct or right, or I speak for probably most of humanity that we all just want to be happy. I think we all just go about it in many different ways, and there are different ways to reach it. But in regards to this book, it really is a book, Leo, like to do this study and to dive into our own understandings of suffering and our own perspectives of suffering. And I think this introduction was really good. So thank you for sharing it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Daniel. Safe to say. Okay.
I just wanted to make a comment on the, especially on the video that you present about what's wrong and what's right. So if you take a life of one person or a life of, to save like 19. So in the Spirit's book, we have this question. I just wanted to bring this, that Kardec asked about, how much something can be considered evil. If, for example, you give an example about, someone that is stealing $1 million, I'm just like paraphrase here, or someone that's stealing $1. So which one is wrong? So the spirit said, evil is evil. There is no half evil. There is no just because the proportion is different. Is different. So before God's law, it is wrong. So I just wanted to make this comment because it seems that Joana de Angeli also, when she talks about this in the book and also the video that you present, is correct. I mean, like at the end, sometimes we forget that it's just because we do a little bit. It's not bad. It's not wrong. But before God's law, it is wrong.
It is correct, Daniel. It's hard for us to understand because we're budgeting, right? We're trying to compensate, the one right or couple rights with a wrong. When we did wrong already, it's done. Now, that doesn't mean we cannot do right things from now on, right, to fix what happened in the past. But we're still living in the past. Guilt issues, problems, many things that can arise from it. But definitely, it's a challenging life. It's very challenging to do the right things, to make good decisions. And it's a challenge for us to understand one another because we have our shortcomings, but we're being invited for more.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to getting the book. But that was a great introduction. Just because the British have a different way of pronouncing the word, we Americans call it hedonism. It was interesting to hear the British guy use hedonism. I mean, not that we have to pick over it, but if we're in this country, most of us say hedonism. When you started, I thought that Joanna had talked to Buddha, because Buddhism starts with life is suffering and then gives tools to change your perspective and let go. So I'm really interested in how she's going to weave Buddhist thinking into this. Yeah, because it's very helpful.
We will see more in the next chapter. I was going to cover both the first 3 chapters today, but definitely we would lose a lot of content because then we have to go pretty fast with it. So we kept it for next session. And that's what we're trying to do. Not to go so fast, but to really take it to heart, to say it that way. But yes, there will be, she brings the Buddhist idea of not living so much into the extremes, right? She talks about what we learn with Buddhism to the suffering over suffering. The suffering because of the escapes that we create and many other things. It's a beautiful analysis that she does, and it is definitely an amazing foundation. And it tells us that what we have received with different religions, guess what? Is for us to utilize, right? And Spiritism is coming, and she's using Spiritism to collective bring these ideas and to say this is where we need to go, right? So Buddhism, Christianity, and Spiritism. Johnny.
The book may be the name, Dialogues and Memories. Diálogos e Recordações, something like this. For Joana de Cusa. No?
It's by Chico Xavier.
Yeah, by Chico Xavier. It says here it's by Chico, but it doesn't tell me the title, really. Boa Nova. Yes. Well, it's right,
I said I was going to remember.
It's right next to it.
Uh-huh. Kirsten, you had a comment too?
I just wanted to say I think the book is a nod to our complexity as human beings because, we talk about, let's be happy, positive thinking, but the more and more you study Joanna de Angelis, you realize we are extremely complex beings, and it's not, overnight that we can solve our problems, although I think we live in a society, like she says, of instant gratification. But in reality, it's more like, like from the movie Shrek, we're like different layers of an onion. We got to keep peeling away. And though it's hard and we may cry, but it's, there's a purpose there. So, yeah.
about the suffering is interesting because I'm here today. I'm so happy. It's better be here than be working, but it's better be working than not work at all.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. To finalize, folks, I would like just to thank everyone for allowing us to share this moment with one another, read these good passages from this book. I'll remind everyone, please read it once we get the books here, because you will take your own takes. You will, come to your own decisions. And if there's something that you would like to discuss, please call me. Please let me know before even present, because you'll be enlightening me with your ideas as well. Because what I'm doing, it can be done by anybody else. And what I would like to emphasize as well, because we ordered both books. Next week, Kirsten will be talking about a motto. Joanna de Angelis presenting us through Plenitude the sufferings, how to get rid of it, and she's going to bring us the example. Jesus in our daily lives, right, Kirsten? Jesus in our days. So she's going to be talking about the example, how we can bring this example in our today's day-to-day lives. 2019. Because when we look at the Master 2,000 years ago, it's quite different, right? We didn't have cell phones, didn't have computers, didn't have cars or anything like that. So how do we bring Jesus in our daily lives so that we feel plenty, so that we reach this fullness, even though not everything is yet perfect? So a thought for you, and to get excited as well for next week and what Kirsten will present for us this beautiful month of January that is almost gone. It's already halfway through, right? And everybody's like, oh my God, what's happening?